When you think of South Africa in the 90s, a few images instantly come to mind. Nelson Mandela and the Madiba Magic, Dr. Khumalo 16V and the legendary 325IS Beamers. But above it all, there was one sound that defined an entire generation: Kwaito music. Kwaito didn't just arrive, it erupted into the scene during one of the most dramatic moments in our history. As South Africa broke free from apartheid and stepped into democracy, this wasn't just music, it was the heartbeat of the township. It was the voice of the youth. For young black South Africans, Kwaito was more than just beats and rhymes. It was freedom, expression, and a brand new identity. When Kwaito blew up, everything changed. Fashion, slang, attitudes, all filtered through its lens. Everyone rocked colorful outfits and all-stars like Trompies, Alaska, and the likes. Kwaito became the definition of cool. Even today, its DNA runs deep in South Africa's modern music culture. Whether it's amapiano or SA hip-hop, there's always a sample, a hook, or a vibe that hacks back to Kwaito. Even if the younger generation doesn't know the origin, they feel it. You see, Kwaito music captured the 90s zeitgeist. In other words, it perfectly expressed the mood, the energy, and the spirit of South Africa in the 90s. There are many ways to tell the Kwaito story. You could start with the DJs who slowed down house beats from 120 to 105 BPMs, creating that laid-back, heavy-hitting groove driven by a bouncy bass line. Or with two bubblegum producers who transformed into the pioneers of a whole new genre. You could even tell it through the journey of a dancer, a former Mr. Soweto who became one of the most prolific marketers and moguls in the business of the 90s sound. Before Kabza and Maphorisa, the Scorpion Kings, there was Mdu and Spikiri, the uncrowned kings. Now these two came up as producers and sound engineers during the bubblegum era. At just 17, they joined forces creating MM Deluxe, releasing an album in 1989 that sold over 25,000 copies and went gold. Now that album marked the end of the bubblegum era and the birth of something new. Now soon after, they went their separate ways. Mdu was the first to gain popularity with this new sound, while Spikiri worked behind the scenes, producing for top artists at the time, but also putting together Trompies, a group that would define Kwaito's golden age. Kwaito didn't just change the sound, it changed the game. It opened doors for young black artists to showcase their talents, and even more importantly, it sparked the rise of black entrepreneurs. DJs became label owners, street smart hustlers, tent music promoters, a new generation of media personalities emerged to speak the language of the streets. Now radio stations like YFM, based in Johannesburg, positioned themselves as the engines of this cultural revolution. Before Kwaito, the industry was dominated by white executives and gatekeepers. But after Kwaito, the gates were kicked wide open. You see, the origins of Kwaito is up for debate, but Joe Nina, Mdu Masilela, and Atama Fukate were one of the first artists to ride the wave, even before the genre had a name. Back then, the streets had their own sound. Raw instrumental tracks like Situri Twiri laid the groundwork for what was about to come. Then came Mdu's Tiki, one of the first true Kwaito tracks. You see, at the time, popular pop tracks were twins with Shona Phansi, Bob Mabena and Dr. Khumalo with Get Funky. See, these were not Kwaito tracks, but they were part of the transition. Now, Atama Fukate, he fused raga and township energy when he dropped an album, I think it was called Windy Windy. And then in that album, I think the track Amagents Ayapanda was part of that. Then Kaffer came after that. Now at parties and street bashes, there were only a handful of Kwaito tracks during that time, and they played two of the most popular songs on repeat, Mdu's Tiki and Bob Mabena and Dr. Khumalo's Get Funky. I remember Christmas of 1993 when I was a kid. Our neighbor had a party and they played those two tracks back to back so many times. Yo man, we couldn't get enough of this music. Now during that time, Spikiri was quietly building behind the scenes, producing for acts like Sinyaka, Kamazu, Baby G, Tsekeleke, and the likes. But when his group Trompis dropped Sikiyang Ngoma the following year, 1994, it was clear Spikiri wasn't just a producer, he was a movement. While Mdu and Spikiri were crafting the sound in the studio, DJs were remixing imported house tracks from Chicago and Europe, slowing them down to fit the township rhythm. Now this gave birth to a whole new club culture in Johannesburg. Now DJs like Oskido and DJ Christos were at the forefront, shifting the nightlife scene from white-dominated raves to black-led dance floors, and street bashes became the new mainstreams. Clubs adapted to the township flavor to attract the growing black market. Radio stations caught on, and suddenly, what started in the Kassis became the sound of the nation. You see, at its heart, Kwaito was born in Soweto, but the energy spread fast across townships in GP. Now people shared cassette tapes across the Kassis, especially the taxi drivers were at the forefront of this cassette movement. And as soon as the media caught on, it reached every corner of South Africa. But not everybody who did Kwaito came from Soweto, but majority did. And no other place in South Africa has produced more successful Kwaito artists like the township of Zola, Gwamsha Zafi. Kwaito artists weren't just making music, they were part of the first real wave of black celebrities in post-apartheid South Africa. Now before the 90s, fame looked very different. Media was heavily censored and tightly controlled by the government. Now to be seen, you had to play by the rules, fit the mold, and that mold, it was designed by the white gatekeepers. But democracy cracked the door open. Suddenly, we were on TV, we were on radio. Fame no longer looked polished and distant. It looked like the guy next door in the township. This wasn't the era of Mkwisheng and Matlandona anymore. This was the rise of the real ones. Your Vinolia Mashikos, your Fat John Kambules, Oscar the Big O, Spiwe Mchali from UTV. They were loud, authentic, raw, and fully themselves. Now Kwaito artists, just like them, were doing it their own way. They didn't need to act right to be accepted. They were the culture. They looked like us, spoke like us, dressed like us, and they carried the weight of a whole generation, stepping into a new South Africa with no map but endless dreams. Now before Kwaito, the youth grew up in the thick of the liberation struggle. They didn't have a defined street culture like we did in the 90s, but they had a movement rooted in black consciousness, the I'm black and I'm proud era with afros, and also the resistance. Then came the Kwaito generation, the lost generation. We were the kids of the new democracy, trying to figure out who we were in a changing South Africa. Kwaito gave us that identity. It handed us confidence. It made us loud, proud, and unapologetically cool. It was the blueprint, the soundtrack of the 90s, and after Kwaito hit, the streets were never the same again. It left a mark that couldn't be erased, a permanent stain in the fibers of our culture. Kwaito became part of our character, weaving into how we speak, dress, dance, and dream. In the late 2000s, Kwaito started evolving. Digital tech entered the scene, and suddenly, all you needed to make a hit was a computer, a keyboard, and a beat in your head. A new generation of bedroom producers and underground DJs rose from the shadows. With them came the birth of a harder, darker subgenre, Gqom. Now Gqom dished the smooth flow and dived deeper into heavy percussions and electronic madness. Now the tempo was faster, the vibe more intense. While DJ Clock helped shape the early sound, it was the Durban wave, led by artists like Big Nas, that took Gqom to the top. But before that, the Pretoria boys were already cooking something special. Producers like Mojava, Bujo Mojo amongst the few had already laid the foundation. With drum-heavy Pretoria house music, Dom took those elements, fused them with the attitude of Durban, and gave birth to what many called Durban Kwaito. And the pioneers of Durban Kwaito were DJ Tira, DJ Sox, Professor and Tizoso. With the backing from Kalawa Jasmine, now Durban became the epicenter of South African street culture. Fact, Durban rocks. Mafunuk Jaiva was a Durban. That wasn't just a slogan, it was a cultural shift. For the first time, Josie wasn't leading the vibe. Durban had the throne. And with that, Kwaito as we knew it started to fade. The sound was changing. The tempo jumped from 105 back to 120 BPMs and even higher. Lyrics got cut down to one-liners. Dance floors demanded harder beats and fewer words. Some of the original legends couldn't keep up with the new pace, but a new generation of artists, DJs, stepped in, took over and ran with it. Artists like Big Nas, Vovo, DJ Bongs and the likes, they emerged, and for a hot minute, they owned the scene. For those of us who grew up after the struggle, Kwaito artists were our rock stars. They were the kings of the Kasis, untouchable, unstoppable and dripping in success. They had it all. The flashiest cars, the hottest women and the flyest fashion, and most dangerously, access to all the drugs in GP. It wasn't a secret that most of the biggest names in Kwaito were deep in the game. Many of them started out just smoking weed for recreation, but when fame hit, so did the pressure. Suddenly, they were rubbing shoulders with industry heavyweights, club owners and label execs who had money, power and clout. And with that came free drugs offered like candy to artists who came from nothing, who now felt they had to keep up with the big boys who ran the Joburg nightlife. Now of all the drugs, coke was the devil in designer clothes. Some of our favorite artists made their best music while they were high. TKZ made We Love This Place while they were on an ecstasy high. Now with dope, the creativity flowed. The parties never ended and the hits kept coming. But as time went on, the cracks started showing. Relationships with bandmates, producers and labels began to fall apart. Finances got messy. Then the stories hit the tabloids. The same artists we worshipped were now front page scandals. Kabelo of TKZ openly spoke about his battle with coke. Briggs had his own struggles with addiction. Mendoza checked into rehab. SB of Chiskop, Mendoza's group, he OD'd on coke. Charos from Trompies battled alcohol. Ishmael of Scheme was also caught up with hard drugs. Now there were many more. Some who spoke up and others who kept their pain hidden. Some were in denial and some never made it back. Kwaito was the dream, but fame came with the price. Now the death of many Kwaito artists was a direct result of the wild, reckless energy of the 90s. It was the era of sex, drugs, alcohol, and sudden fame in a newly liberated country. Now post-apartheid, fame hit different. These artists were the first generation of black South Africans to get rich and famous almost overnight, but they had no blueprint, no guide on how to handle the pressure, the money, and the access. Some made it through, but others didn't. One of Kwaito's early dark stories was in 2001 when Magesh of TKZ had a fatal car accident in Botswana. If I'm not mistaken, he was under the influence and the other driver, a businesswoman, Maria Munyatsi, lost her life. Now Magesh was very critical. Many thought he was not going to make it, but he did. Magesh was 21 at the time and the government of Botswana wanted to hang him. They wanted to give him a death sentence. The case went on for 6 years and Magesh was never the same again. The music, the lyricism, the flair, all of that was gone. Not like completely gone, but it was never top tier like it once was. Now years later, in 2008, the same thing happened to his friend Mendoza. He crashed his Crossfire into a Jetta that flipped over and 2 occupants died. Witnesses said Mendoza was drunk, but police never took his blood. The deaths that hit Kwaito the hardest was when Mendoza and Brown Dash died. When we saw their final performances, we felt it. The energy, the pain, the way they moved. It was as if everyone knew it might be their last time on stage. But when Mangash of TKZ passed, it felt official. Kwaito, as we knew it, was gone. And the truth is, Kwaito didn't die in vain. Before it faded, it gave birth to something new. Something that would take nearly 20 years to grow up and step out and reclaim the township crown once worn by the legends. And then it happened. Now post-pandemic, Amapiano became the king of the streets. From lockdown house parties to online live sets, from backyard bashes to club anthems. Now Amapiano took off like a rocket. In the darkest days of the pandemic, it was the soundtrack of survival. And when the world reopened, Amapiano didn't slow down, it dominated. But Amapiano isn't just a genre, it's a whole movement. It changed the way young people dress, dance, talk, even socialize. It gave rise to a new generation of producers, DJs who aren't just making beats, they are building empires. Now these young cats are tech savvy, street smart and fearless. No big marketing budgets, no fancy rollout, just a viral TikTok dance and boom, the streets are on fire. And through Amapiano, Kwaito still lives. The rhythm, the swag, the attitude and the hustle, it's all there. Just reimagined for a new generation, but the glory still belongs to the sons of the ghettos. Chico Twala had to crawl so that Spikiri and Mdu could walk. They walked so that Durban's finest could run. And now, Amapiano is flying the flag across the world. And for all of us 90s kids, this moment is special. We're just grateful we lived long enough to see it come full circle again. Same energy, different players, and we love it. The story of Mixit is etched into the memories of kids who were teenagers around the mid-2000s. It wasn't just a messaging app, it was a cultural phenomenon. For the first time, we had a tool that completely revolutionized communication. Strangers forged real connections over their phones, and countless teenagers experienced the internet for the very first time. Mixit turned kids into nighttime zombies, hiding under blankets and chatting away into the early hours, pretending to be asleep. It was as addictive as dope, a digital high that no one had seen coming. But with its meteoric rise came a darker side: predators. Those PDFs lurked in the shadows of chat rooms, deceiving naive teenagers, posing as their peers. Now the thrill of Mixit was undeniable, but its safety concerns cast a long shadow. But still, nothing could stop its wildfire-like spread until the game changed. The arrival of BlackBerry and smartphones rewrote the rules of mobile communication, leaving Mixit struggling to keep up. Now in this episode, we'll delve into the genius idea of Herman Hunes, the groundbreaking creation that was Mixit. Mixit wasn't just a messaging app, it was a movement. It brought millions of people together, broke through barriers and proved to the world that innovation knows no borders. Its meteoric rise and eventual fall holds timeless lessons about the power of adaptability and the relentless speed of technological change. This is more than a story about technology. It's a celebration of Africa's boundless creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. Now, Mixit set the stage for tech innovations, inspiring a new generation of tech entrepreneurs to harness technology to solve local challenges. Though Mixit is no longer active, its impact lives on. It was a pioneer, revolutionizing mobile communication in underserved regions like remote townships and rural areas. It showed the transformative power of mobile technology to close communication gaps and spark social connections that once seemed impossible. At the heart of this revolution was a modest visionary, Herman Hunes, born in what was known as Southwest Africa, or what we know now as Namibia. His father was a sheep farmer. Now Hunes discovered his passion for programming as a teenager around the early 1980s. Now, after earning a BCom degree at Stellenbosch University, he stayed rooted in the university town of Stellies, except for a brief stint writing software code for the Navy during his national service for 2 years. Herman Hunes began shaping the tech landscape early in his career. By 1985, he had become a software specialist, and in 1990, he launched his own information and communications technology consultancy. Now in 1997, he founded Swiss Group Technologies, a company focused on software development and services for telecommunications network operators. Now the success of Swiss provided the funding for what would eventually become his most iconic creation, Mixit. In the year 2000, Hunes and his team took a bold step into uncharted territory by inventing a game called Araya, a massive multiplayer mobile game that used SMSs. Now, despite its innovative concept, the game failed to gain traction because of the high cost of SMSs at the time. But failure didn't stop Hunes. Instead, it inspired him. In 2003, trying to solve the high-cost communications problem, he revisited the lessons learned from the Araya game and envisioned something bigger and better, Mixit. Instead of sending SMSs, Mixit used the internet to send messages, which cut the cost of sending a message drastically. Now the concept was born, but the only problem they had in 2003 was that GPRS connection wasn't available everywhere in South Africa until late 2004 to 2005, when we had 2.5G. Now what began as a setback with Araya became the spark for one of South Africa's most impactful tech innovations.
I'm talking today to Herman Hunes, who is the CEO and founder of Mixit. Herman, describe to me what the company does.
Well, in short, Mixit is a social network and instant messaging based on mobile phones, and it was developed in South Africa, specifically for emerging markets such as Africa, obviously.
And how did the idea come about for doing it?
It's quite a long, very long path that we followed. It started off initially as a massive multiplayer mobile game in the early 2000s. It went through a number of iterations, and eventually in 2005 we launched a mobile instant messaging system that today evolved to much more than just social mobile messaging. But
Mixit became the first introduction to the internet and digital socializing for countless young people. It wasn't just about messaging, it was about connection. Love stories began, friendships blossomed, flings ignited, and even shady dealings found their way into the mix. Now it became a visual playground where usernames were the ultimate status symbol, like a flashy custom number plate for your digital identity. Now Mixit was the new streets for the kids. On the Joe Banker tab, you could do different things from accessing chat rooms, in-app games, and customizing your interface. Now, since teenagers are more tech-savvy than most adults, kids quickly discovered Mixit's potential. With its near zero cost, it spread like wildfire. Now, once the kids got hooked, it was game over. In 2007, under Koos Becker, Naspers acquired a 30% stake in Mixit for an undisclosed amount. Now, Naspers had been riding the technology wave from very early on. They invested in the Chinese tech giant Tencent early and reaped massive returns on that investment, which significantly boosted the company's value. Not wanting to miss a similar opportunity in Africa, they decided to invest in Mixit. Mixit wasn't just popular, it was addictive. Kids became Mixit zombies, glued to their phones at all hours. Now strangers chatted through the night only to drag themselves to school the next day, blurry-eyed but still glued to their screens. And when they got to school, the conversations continued, weaving themselves into the fabric of daily life. But there was a cost. Many kids missed out on real-world social interactions with peers and family members. Now their eyes were fixed on their cell phones, their fingers constantly typing out messages. Now this was the first generation to fully embrace the internet, but it also became a generation plagued by social anxiety and dismissed face-to-face communication skills. For many, Mixit became an easier alternative to navigating real-world relationships. At night, while parents believed their children were fast asleep or studying, many were secretly sending and receiving Mixit messages under their blankets. For the first time, teenagers were exposed to the growing trend of sharing explicit content online, like nudes. Now, the rise of sexting introduced young people to a world of risks and vulnerability they were ill-equipped to handle. Now, before Mixit, no one had seen such intense obsession with phones, nor the constant round-the-clock communication that defined this era. Mixit wasn't just an app, it was a cultural phenomenon. It redefined how young South Africans communicated, connected, and built their own digital universe, shaping an entire generation in ways both exciting and unsettling. The public raised concerns over the safety of children on the platform. Now, many criticized it, saying that it was a product that could lead children right into the hands of PDFs. There were reports of predators who would lure young girls or boys using Mixit and then abducted them for days. In one case, the police used Mixit to catch predators. Now, people were not always honest about their personal details. She might have been a he and might have been 40 years older than the kid on the other side. Though cell phones were a highly convenient means of communication, the obsession with text messaging created by Mixit was endangering both the safety and social development of the youth. Mixit scored 0 out of 7 points on the Electronic Frontier Foundation's secure messaging scorecard. It lost points because communications was not secured and it wasn't encrypted. Users couldn't verify contacts' identities. Now, past messages were also not secure if the encryption keys were stolen. Now, the code was not open to independent review and the security design was not properly documented, and there had never been an independent code audit. The evolution of phones took a dramatic leap with the arrival of BlackBerry, a game changer that stormed into the South African market at just the right time. What started as a luxury product for the upper class quickly became the ultimate gadget for the coolest kids. Now, BlackBerry's QWERTY keyboard was a revelation, making chatting and typing faster, more seamless than ever. Now add a slick interface, superior features, and the iconic BBM, and you had what felt like an exclusive club for the elites. Now one that everybody wanted to join. But BlackBerry's real trump card was the BIS, which offered unlimited internet access for an entire month at a low cost. It revolutionized connectivity, creating a wave of migration as South Africans eagerly swapped their old devices for the hottest smartphone on the market. As Mixit struggled to address its safety issues, grappling with predators and bullies on its platform, users began abandoning it in favor of BlackBerry, which was much safer. Mixit's flaws became glaring. Users could share contacts with strangers without much concern, and the introduction of a search bar made it even easier for predators to find targets. Now, BlackBerry, in contrast, offered a more secure and private environment, free from those vulnerabilities. While BlackBerry soared, Mixit faced yet another challenge: the rise of rival social networks. Platforms like Facebook gained traction by offering something Mixit couldn't: authenticity. Unlike Mixit's anonymous usernames, Facebook encouraged people to interact as themselves, making conversations feel safer and more trustworthy. For users tired of predators hiding behind fake profiles, Facebook was a breath of fresh air. Meanwhile, Mixit's resistance to innovate proved to be its undoing. Instead of adapting quickly to the smartphone's revolution, it clung to its outdated system. Competitors like To Go and MiG-33, amongst a few, seized the opportunity, carving out their own space in the growing social media landscape. Now, Mixit's inability to evolve, combined with its failure to ensure user safety, marked the beginning of its decline. What was once a trailblazer in the mobile communication space couldn't keep up with the rapidly changing digital world. Now, why did Herman Yunus, its founder and driving force, decided to step away? The answer is sheer exhaustion. Now, after years of relentless work, Yunus admitted that his energy levels had been in steady decline for the last 18 months of being at Mixit. Now, despite whispers in 2011 that Mixit was past its prime, Yunus dismissed the critics with confidence, saying there were people in 2004 who said a free mobile instant messaging platform would never work, but he proved them wrong. And according to him, the possibilities for Mixit were endless, with the right team to carry it forward. When Mixit was sold, the exact amount quickly became one of South Africa's most intriguing mysteries. While some rumors suggested the deal reached a staggering R500 million, more conservative estimates placed the figure between 320 million and 380 million rands. Yet no one, neither Naspers or World of Avatar nor Yunus himself, was willing to confirm or deny the numbers. Now, a stringent non-disclosure agreement surrounded the deal, locking the lips of everyone involved in the negotiations. Now, this veil of secrecy only added to the intrigue as South Africans speculated about the true value of the pioneering platform that had captured the hearts and minds of millions of South Africans. When Allen took over, Mixit was already struggling with a tarnished reputation, particularly concerning safety issues that the company had been struggling to fix. Now, Allen seemed to underestimate the sheer scale of the problem. You see, Mixit needed more than just fresh funds. It needed a team of experts with experience in the social network space to survive. Now, the platform required a blend of strong technical expertise and a creative flair, something to recapture the spark that once had made Mixit so captivating. Now without this, Mixit's days were numbered, and Allen didn't know exactly what to do with Mixit. You see, there were talks that it might turn into a fintech company, but the direction was never clear. Now there was another rumor that said one of the plans that Allen had for Mixit was to make Mixit a prepaid distribution channel and encouraged users to move to Cell C. A few months before buying Mixit, he reached an agreement with former Cell C CEO Lars Reichelt to sell airtime. However, Reichelt left Cell C in July of 2011, and his successor, former Vodacom CEO, his father, Alan Not Craig Sr., did not see sense in the deal, and it was downhill from there.
Let's just put things in perspective. 650 million, almost 700 million phones on the continent, and about 75% of those are feature phones. And about 75% of all new phone sales are still feature phones. South Africa is a slightly low percentage of feature phones. I think it's 65% or so. But there's this huge, enormous market that it's not going to disappear. If people get better phones, they pass the existing phones down to their kids and to other people. So the feature phones are always there. And unless you've got a product that works across feature phones, you can't get anywhere in Africa. But I also realized that it's not just a messaging app. You cannot pay people, you can entertain yourself, you can get games and all of that stuff. And half my challenges nowadays are trying to figure out what exactly Mixit is. Facebook's a threat. I mean, they've got lots of money, they've got lots of clever people, they've got a lot of users. I think there are a couple of differences. So one is we're Africa. We're in Africa. We're not in America. We can see the market. We're trying to solve our own problems. We're not trying to invade somebody else's country. We understand that people are using mobile phones, and that's the way. There's no going back to PCs later, etc. It's just leapfrogging everything into mobile phones. And most of those phones are not going to be smartphones for now.
Francis Swart assumed the role of interim CEO at the company, and Mixit started to retrench employees due to bad financial performance. Former CEO Michael Jordan was appointed as chairman of the Mixit board in September of 2013, but by then the platform's fate had already been sealed. By the time it shut down, Mixit's active monthly users had dropped to 1.2 million. Now, at the same time, WhatsApp had grown to 10 million users in South Africa and Facebook 13 million. Now, after leaving Mixit, Yunus took an extended sabbatical, during which he completed a number of adventures, mountain bike races, practiced wildlife photography, and took up kite surfing. The downfall of Mixit can be traced back to the person who took the reins after the company's initial success, Allen. Despite being at the forefront of the acquisition, Allen was not a tech genius or an innovator like Herman Yunus. Born with a silver spoon, Allen came from a wealthy family with strong business ties, particularly from the Stellenbosch elite business network. Now, thanks to his father's connections, he was able to raise the funds and purchase Mixit, but unfortunately, he lacked the drive and vision and also creativity needed to be able to save Mixit and take the company to the next level. Mixit's fate was sealed when the iPhone came along and crushed BlackBerry's dominance as the phone of choice. Now, the rise of platforms like WhatsApp and Instagram further eroded Mixit's advantage. Now, as the platform standardization allowed developers to create apps that could work across a wider variety of devices. By October 2012, Eleanor Craig left the company, citing differences in strategy with the shareholders. But in reality, they fired him because they didn't know what he was doing. He basically wasted the investors' money. The Second South African War marks an important period in the history of the Afrikaner people. Before the war, many Afrikaners faced significant disadvantages. They were often discriminated against, which limited their opportunities for advancement. Most of the few well-off Afrikaners were involved in agriculture. Meanwhile, the English-speaking white population, particularly the Jewish community, dominated the economy and politics with support from the Western powers and investors. The economic depression of the early 1930s forced many Afrikaners to leave their farms and move to cities, lacking the skills needed to succeed in a competitive urban environment. Many were relegated to low-paying jobs. By 1939, nearly 40% of urbanized Afrikaner men worked in occupations such as manual labor, mining, railway work, and bricklaying. A well-known Afrikaner communist of back then, Dan du Plessis, observed that real power in the country was not held by parliament or the cabinet, but by the capitalists. He argued that these capitalists fuel racial hatred amongst workers to maximize profits. Now, the system of low wages suppressed both black workers and poor Afrikaners. Now, du Plessis called on workers to unite, overthrow the capitalist system and replace it with communism. The Afrikaners distrusted the West and the capitalist system, which they saw as the root of their poverty. In response, they sought to separate themselves from this system and build one that prioritized their interests. After the war, the British government realized that their system of oppressing both blacks and Afrikaners was unsustainable. They feared that continued oppression might unite these groups against them, leading to even greater problems. Now, to avoid this, they began slowly integrating Afrikaners into positions of power politically. The Afrikaners gradually gained political ground, winning their first election in 1924. Now, in 1928, the government created ISCO, a state-owned steel company managed largely by Afrikaners. Initially, the Afrikaners aimed to nationalize the country's resources, similar to the ideas proposed by Julius Malema today. However, once they gained a taste of power, they abandoned those plans. The Broederbond, aka the Brotherhood of Power, was a secret society that promoted Afrikaner nationalism by preserving Afrikaner culture and ultimately gaining control of the South African government and economy. Membership was by invitation only, restricted to Afrikaner men over the age of 25. This organization was the real power behind the apartheid system, not the official cabinet. It was considered one of the most influential secret societies in the world. Membership was highly exclusive. Women, black people, Jews, Catholics, divorcees, and Afrikaners who did not regularly attend church were strictly prohibited from joining. Any Afrikaner men hoping to be accepted into the Brotherhood needed to avoid marrying an English-speaking white woman, let alone a woman of color. Those who made it into the Broederbond were part of an elite castle of privileged and politically influential Afrikaners. Now, the organization's motto, Wees sterk, be strong, embodied the ideals its members were expected to uphold. Membership visually guaranteed wealth and power, as it connected individuals to a vast and influential network. The Broederbond was the real Afrikaner mafia, due to its control over various aspects of society. This secretive organization was the driving force that ultimately put Afrikaners in control of South Africa. From 1948 to 1994, every South African president was a member of the Broederbond, including the late President F.W. de Klerk, who joined at the unusually young age of 27 in 1964. Beyond politics, the Broederbond operated through covert channels to ensure its influence extended to key areas of society, including the civil service, judiciary, academia, church, police, sports associations, and city councils. They even controlled the Bantu administration boards, which governed life in black townships, ensuring that apartheid policies were upheld across all levels of government and society. Volkskapitalisme, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but it stands for the people's capitalism, was an economic ideology aimed at improving the economic conditions of Afrikaners. Now, the Broederbond introduced this concept in 1939. Hendrik Verwoerd, often called the architect of apartheid, organized the first economic congress of the people, where the Afrikaners were encouraged to unite and pool their resources to uplift their community economically. Over time, this movement led to the creation of key institutions such as Volkskas Bank and Sanlam. Now, Volkskas, meaning the People's Bank, which actually later became Absa, was founded in 1934 in Pretoria as a cooperative loan bank. It provided financial services to Afrikaners who had moved from rural areas to the cities due to the Great Depression. Now, similarly, Sanlam was established as an insurance and investment company to serve the needs of the Afrikaner community. These institutions played a crucial role in consolidating the Afrikaners community's power during the apartheid era. They were largely controlled by and for the benefit of the Afrikaner community, strengthening their financial position within South Africa. Anton Rupert and Hendrik Verwoerd never got along, as they had vastly different political ideologies. I'll explain later in the video how Verwoerd's policies almost cost Anton his company. Now, despite their differences, Anton was a member of the Broederbond as well. His early business partners were Dag Hertzog and Nico Dederiks. Now, Nico later became South Africa's Minister of Finance. In 1940, Anton started a dry cleaning business in Pretoria and left his chemistry studies to join an Afrikaner organization called the Redingdat Bond, meaning the Rescue Action League. Now, this organization was one of the initiatives born from the first Economic Congress of the People, aimed at uplifting poor white Afrikaners. Now, Anton was tasked with leading the business section of the organization in Johannesburg, where he evaluated and approved loans for small businesses. Many of these businesses, they failed, but this role likely introduced Anton to the broader world of business. Despite the Afrikaners gaining political power, economic dominance remained elusive. 30 years after they took control of the government, Afrikaner-owned businesses were still few and far between. The business sector was largely dominated by English-speaking South Africans and Jewish entrepreneurs. The Afrikaner businesses that did succeed included Nasionale Pers, which is Naspers, Sanlam, Santam, Volkskas, and Voortrekker Pers, which was another media publication. By the late 1930s, Afrikaner capital accounted for only 5% of the country's total turnover. Organizations like the Redingdat Bond worked to encourage Afrikaners or young Afrikaner entrepreneurs to enter the business world and compete with English businesses. Through the Redingdat Bond organization, Anton Rupert discovered a bankrupt tobacco company in Paarl, about 40 minutes from Cape Town, called Voorbrand. Now, together with his partners, Nico Dederiks and AJ Stolz, who later became a member of parliament. Now, Anton raised funds from the Afrikaner community, primarily old wine and tobacco farmers. He also invested £10,000 of his own money to purchase the business. At the time, the tobacco industry was dominated by large English-owned companies, making it difficult for newcomers to enter the market. Many Afrikaner farmers were being underpaid for their tobacco by these major companies. Now, Anton saw an opportunity to support these farmers by offering them fair prices for their crops. In turn, they supported him by selling their tobacco to his company, seeing him as one of their own. This strategy succeeded because of the shared mission within the Afrikaner community to uplift each other economically. Through the same Redingdat Bond organization, Anton also acquired another bankrupt company in Stellenbosch. He purchased its assets and machinery, transforming it into the Distillers Corporation. Now, Western Cape farmers invested in this venture, officially making the Rupert's family's entry into the liquor and cigarettes industry, which is big bucks. Anton was a marketing and branding genius. He had a knack for taking ordinary products and making them highly appealing through innovative marketing and design. He was meticulous about every product launch, always striving to improve marketing campaigns and brand designs. The Distillers Corporation became the first Afrikaner company to be listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in 1945, 31 years after the Afrikaners gained political power in 1924. Now in 1948, just a week after D.F. Malan's National Party won the elections, Rembrandt, Anton's company, produced its first cigarette. In 1953, Rembrandt made its first major move on the international stages by acquiring Rothmans, one of the most prestigious tobacco companies in the UK. The owner of Rothmans, a friend of Anton Rupert, was on the verge of selling the family business to a rival due to financial difficulties. Now Rupert stepped in with an offer of £750,000 for the company. After the deal was agreed upon, Anton contributed £50,000 of his own money and turned to his Afrikaner Connect, Sanlam and Volkskas to secure the remaining £700,000 as a loan. Now this acquisition marked the beginning of the Rupert's business empire worldwide. The Rothmans deal gave Rupert a solid base to expand into European and global markets. Now the company saw massive success with their launch of the Peter Stuyvesant cigarette brand in 1954, thanks to Anton's exceptional marketing and branding expertise. Now Peter Stuyvesant became a global hit, achieving significant sales growth in Europe, North America, Africa and Australia. In its first year alone, sales skyrocketed by over 4,700%. These guys made a killing. Anton Rupert's success inspired a generation of Afrikaner businessmen, proving that they could compete and thrive in an economy dominated by English and Jewish interest. Now Rupert became the first internationally recognized Afrikaner businessman, making Stellenbosch his home base. It's fair to say that Anton Rupert was the original Stellenbosch Mafia. Remgro is arguably the leading enterprise in Stellenbosch, with vast interest across multiple industries. It is one of South Africa's most successful investment companies, often referred to by Julius Malema as part of white monopoly capital. Now, one of its vast valuable ventures is Mediclinic, in which Remgro owns a 44% stake. Now, Mediclinic is the largest private hospital group listed on the JSE, with a market capitalization of 76 billion rands, but I'm sure it's more by now. Edwin Hertzog, the founder of Mediclinic, also serves as the deputy chairman of Remgro's board. Now Hertzog has been a core member of the Remgro's team since its early days. Basically, Hertzog is a Remgro day one soldier, even before Johann Rupert joined the family business. Now the Hertzog Family Trust was one of the founding shareholders of Richmond, now a Swiss-based luxury goods company which is owned by the Ruperts. Now this is before Johann Rupert bought their shares out. Now this long-standing relationship between the Herzogs and the Ruperts reflects their deep historical ties from back then. Edwin Hertzog was the visionary behind Mediclinic's success, with the support of the Remgro Group, of course. Now Mediclinic has grown to operate about 53 private hospitals and has expanded its footprint internationally. The company holds significant investments in the UK, Switzerland and the Middle East, where it has become a major player in the private healthcare industry. These guys are making big bucks overseas. Other companies with roots in Remgro's network includes Capitec Bank, which I'll cover in a future video, and PSG, another successful venture born from the Remgro soldiers. Johann Rupert attended Paul Ross Gymnasium and later studied economics and company law at the University of Stellenbosch. Now, during his studies, he discovered his passion for finance and entrepreneurship, so he eventually dropped out of university to pursue his ambitions. After leaving university, Johan moved to New York, where he joined Chase Manhattan Bank, now JP Morgan Chase, and worked there for 2 years. Now, during this time, David Rockefeller, a family friend, was his boss. He then joined Lazard Ferrer, a financial advisory and asset management firm, where he worked for another 3 years. In 1979, Johan returned to South Africa and established Rand Merchant Bank, which he managed until 1984. Johan joined the family business Rembrandt in 1984 to address a crisis his father Anton Rupert was facing at Rothmans International in London. Anton was losing control of the company due to the conflicts with partners on the board. This was because of a particularly challenging time for South African businesses, as the country was in turmoil. Apartheid was at its peak under P.W. Botha, with widespread violence, burning townships, and part of the country becoming ungovernable. International sanctions further strained South African companies and also South African businessmen, including Rupert, who was running this big company, which was then a leading player in the global cigarette industry, thanks to his efforts. The situation escalated into a cold war in the boardroom, as the opposing board members attempted to oust Anton. Now, according to Johan, this move was more personal than political. With Johan's involvement, the family eventually regained control by removing those board members on the board. And these guys were people who Anton himself invited into the board in the beginning. Now they were trying to get him out and take his company, because he was Afrikaans and he was assumed to be part of the problem. Johan Rupert has been South Africa's highest individual taxpayer for the past 20 years. His family businesses are amongst the largest contributors of dividends from international operations back into South Africa, surpassing the combined contributions of the rest of the JSE listed companies. In 2015, the Center for Competition, Regulation and Development at the University of Johannesburg conducted a study that revealed that Remgro's investments provided it with influence over firms with a combined market capitalization of 1.3 trillion rands. Now today, only 10 companies listed on the JSE existed 80 years ago, and Remgro is one of them. Anton Rupert was a key figure in an Afrikaner initiative that succeeded. He was a member of the Broederbond and had strong connections with influential figures in the National Party. Both his father and mother were involved with the National Party, giving him access to a powerful network of people. Additionally, during that era, less than half of South Africa's population was actively participating in the economy, which created opportunities that worked in his favor. In the early 90s, a farmer from Elandskral in Limpopo named Gerrie Fourie wanted to process the peanuts he harvested into peanut butter and sell it on a large scale. However, the Oilseeds Board, then the regulatory body for that sector, had its own system. Farmers were first required to sell their harvest to the board and then buy it back at a marked price. To Gerrie, that didn't make sense. Now stuck with the ton of peanuts, he decided to sell them directly in large bags around Elandskral and Giyani. His customers were primarily black people in the area, and over time, through doing business with them, Gerrie began to understand their needs, and the biggest one amongst them was access to cash. He and his brother opened what appeared to be a peanut wholesale shop, but it was actually a front for a cash loan business. Now, Gerrie didn't want others to copy their business model, and he also wanted to avoid attracting attention from criminals, so they kept a low profile. Now, at the time, coming out the apartheid era, most black South Africans didn't have access to banking. The entire financial system favored white people or the privileged. Now, most black people often didn't earn enough to qualify for loans, and their transaction sizes were considered too small to be profitable by big banks. For example, a loan under 6,000 came at a 3% interest rate cap, which was unattractive to big banks. Now, as a result, the banks largely excluded poor and black communities. Meanwhile, white South Africans had stable jobs, home equity, pension funds, and access to credit from banks. Now, with the majority of blacks unbanked and cash-strapped, township loan sharks stepped in to fill in the gaps. Gerrie and his brother quickly realized the scale of the problem and the potential gold mine it represented. Now, in 1992, the Minister of Finance, Derek Keys, announced that loans under 6,000 rands with a term shorter than 36 months, lenders could charge any interest rate they wanted. The hope was that banks would begin serving people in need of small loans, but the banks showed little interest. For most people, that announcement went unnoticed, except for Gerrie and his brother. They began lending money by thousands, and the business grew faster than expected. Now, to keep up with demand, they brought in a friend named Hendrik, who used to lease them farm equipment. Gerrie told him that for every 1,000 he lends out, he gets back 1.3. Hendrik saw the opportunity and he jumped in. Now, Hendrik told his friend Louis about this opportunity. Now, together, they went into business separate from Gerrie and his brother. Though business was booming, Gerrie and his bro continued operating under the cover of a peanut shop to avoid drawing too much attention and triggering a gold rush. Now, Hendrik, on the other hand, he refined this process. He targeted salary workers, offering them short-term payday loans with 30% interest. They kept the borrowers' cards and pins. They withdrew repayment amounts on payday and then returned the cards. Now, payday loans exploded in popularity. They even began advertising in the Sowetan, reaching a wider audience and growing the business even further. In 1994, after South Africa achieved freedom, black South Africans had to be integrated into the economy. Almost overnight, government institutions were filled with black workers. Many white employees resigned. Some stayed and others received severance packages. At the time, many white South Africans found themselves sitting on a pile of cash, while a large number of newly employed black workers became economically active. This meant more salary individuals from the black communities and more potential for payday loan customers. But not all white people recognized this opportunity. But those who did told their friends and families. They pulled their money together and went into the payday loan business. With interest at 30% per month, it became a gold rush. Hendrik and Louis ended up franchising their business model. By the end of that year, they had opened around 374 branches, and you can guess who wasn't happy about that. Gerrie and his brother. They wanted to keep the business low-key. Now, on paydays, loan sharks would be at ATMs early in the morning. The boerers with their 4x4s, armed with coffee in one hand and a pump action gun on the other. They withdrew repayments directly from their customers' accounts and take that cash back to the office to fund new loans. Now, ATMs would sometimes run out of money. With so much money being made and desperate people being charged sky-high interest rates, the government had to step in. The then Finance Minister, Trevor Manuel, introduced new regulations to bring the industry under proper control and stop the exploitation. It didn't happen immediately, but everyone knew after that announcement that the gold rush was about to end very soon. Boland Bank is important to the Capitec story because Capitec was built using the blueprint that was created at Boland. But Boland collapsed before their plans could even materialize. Christo Wiese got the funding to buy out Rennie van Rooyen, the founder of PEP, from Boland Bank. He had served on the bank's board since 1985. In 1990, when Absa attempted a corporate takeover of Boland Bank, Christo blocked the move by purchasing majority shareholding. The Reserve Bank gave him the green light, and just like that, he ended up owning a bank. Coming from PEP and Shoprite, Christo understood that there was a lot of money to be made by serving poor black customers, an underserved market with massive potential. He wanted to reposition Boland to focus on that segment. Now, to do this, he needed a sharp, high-level operator to lead the transformation. His first choice was Basson, knowing Whitey's strength and track record. But at the time, Whitey was focused on growing the Checkers Group into the largest retailer in the country, so he declined. But there was another top-tier business mind Christo trusted, Michael LaRue. Now, LaRue had been a managing director at the distillers Rupert's company since the age of 30, running it successfully for 15 years. Initially, LaRue wasn't interested in banking. His passion was in the liquor business. But in 1995, when LaRue heard that McDonald's was coming to South Africa, he had planned to start a rival fast food chain, but he lacked the right team, and the plan didn't happen. Christo spent nearly 5 months convincing LaRue to lead Boland Bank. Eventually, LaRue agreed, but he knew it would be a tough job. Now, at the time, the bank was in poor shape and needed serious turnaround. LaRue started assembling a team of go-getters. The first person on his list was Rian Stayson, his former assistant and later head of distribution at Distillers. Now, Stayson was known for his skills in pricing and product strategy. Basically, these guys were what the media dubbed as the Stellenbosch Mafia. So the team that he was assembling were guys from Stellenbosch and guys that he had already worked with before. As the team dug into market research, they discovered a company called King Finance had already developed an effective model for lending to lower income customers without needing to take their bank cards or pins. Now, King Finance was part of a larger group listed on the JSE. So aside from competing with big banks, Boland also had to compete with nimble players already thriving in the informal credit space. The competition was tough. To build a strong foundation, LaRue brought in more trusted colleagues from his days at Distillers, people he believed in. Now, coming from the liquor industry, they approached banking differently from traditional institutions, bringing a fresh perspective and a strong commercial instincts. One of Boland Bank's early goals was to specialize in digital banking. They had a brilliant IT expert named Chris Oosthuizen, who had studied IT systems and ATM technology in Dallas, Texas. Oosthuizen revolutionized the bank systems. Instead of manually processing checks and balancing ledgers at the back office, he developed a digital system that automated those tasks years ahead of its time. He even built core IT infrastructure for a bank in Namibia. He was very good at his job. But eventually, things took a turn. Christo Visa had leveraged most of his assets to finance his various ventures, and at some point he had bid more than he could chew. So to keep his broader business interest afloat, he had to sell the bank. Despite assembling a world-class team, building solid plans and implementing cutting-edge technology, Christo had to walk away, and Michael LaRue chose to leave the company as well. Yanni Mouton and Chris Otto ran PSG Holdings. At one point, they had read a book about Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which provided microloans to poor rural people without requiring any collateral. Most borrowers used the money to fund small businesses, and over time, the bank helped lift many people out of poverty through microlending. The model was so impactful, its founder, Mohamed Yunus, was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, inspired by this story, Yanni and Chris developed their own vision. In 1998, they launched a division within PSG focused on microlending and alternative banking, which they called PSG Specialized Lending. They recognized that South Africa had a major challenge with millions of unbanked, low-income individuals. This division began aggressively acquiring payday and 30-day loan shops across the country, especially in rural areas. Now, these acquisitions gave PSG not only a wide footprint, but also access to valuable data and deeper insights into borrowers' profiles. They saw that if done right, this venture could both help people and become a highly profitable business. Now, to bring this vision to life, they needed a top-tier operator, someone experienced, strategic, and trusted. Now, since PSG was founded by individuals who had been mentored by Rupert, the Stellenbosch Mafia basically, they turned to one of their own, Michael Leroux, who had recently left Boland Bank. Now this time, Leroux came with solid experience in banking. When Leroux joined PSG, he immediately saw the potential and insisted on bringing in his entire management team from Boland Bank. Now, with Boland having been shut down recently, the team didn't need much convincing. When Leroux called, they all showed up. Everyone sat down to map out this new project. They already had a large database and customer profiles from the loan shops they had been acquiring. They had visited many townships and rural branches to better understand the communities they were going to serve. What they discovered was clear. The emerging black market required a fundamentally different banking approach than what traditional banks were offering. Many customers were uneducated and didn't understand interest rates, so financial education was necessary. The process needed to be simple, paperless, and easy to follow. Some clients lived in informal housing like shacks and couldn't provide proof of address. So the team needed to come up with new processes like adapting fingerprint recognition technology to overcome those type of problems. They also learned that location mattered. Branches needed to be close to transport hubs so clients could access them easily. One of the most important principles the former Boland Bank team brought with them was the thinking like a retailer. Coming from the world of Pep and ShopRite, Christo had always emphasized this approach. Serving poor working class customers required a different mindset than serving the middle class. For example, they realized that blue-collar workers finished work late, so banking hours needed to be extended to at least 5 o'clock. That came from Boland. They also noticed that customers would spend an entire day walking shop to shop, paying off debts at month end. So they developed a technology to consolidate those payments, allowing clients to pay all their debts at once with the help of a teller or a consultant. The team went all in to understand the emerging black market as best as they could. All that remained was to clean up the image of microlending, often associated with loan sharks, lower their interest rates, and secure a full banking license. While the rest of the PSG team was focused on acquiring more cash loan shops to consolidate into a single company, the former Boland Bank team was quietly building a real bank. They met daily, sharing ideas, refining strategies. They engaged directly with customers in remote and rural areas, listening carefully to their needs to truly understand how to serve them better. For 8 months straight, the team worked day in, day out, refining this business model. Their goal wasn't just to create a bank for the poor. It was to build an innovative bank with a crossover appeal that could eventually serve all segments of society. The products would be simple, effective, and stripped of unnecessary extras, much like Pep stores, which had already mastered the low-income retail market. To reduce paperwork and simplify the process, technology had to be the driver. They brought in the same IT expert from Boland Bank, who had previously computerized operations that side. Now, to move quickly, Chris Otto, the IT guy, suggested that they purchase an existing banking software system from Australia, which they could customize for the South African market. Now, when it came to getting a banking license, they discovered that PSG had already had one. They had purchased it earlier from a finance institution that went bankrupt in anticipation of starting a bank someday later. Their branch model was simple but innovative. Small physical spaces to keep rental costs low with no administrative staff. Consultants would be trained to handle all customer needs directly without needing on-site back office support. and all admin tasks would be handled through a centralized support function and a data-driven call center. Now, this lean structure would help reduce costs so customers wouldn't be overcharged for basic services. Only now the big banks are doing this. Now, the big banks now are downsizing their spaces and digitizing their bank processes to reduce costs. But Capitec has long been on that wave. By the year 2000, PSG had acquired a lot of micro-lending shops, close to 400, and the team was ready. At this point, smaller lenders had little choice but to sell. Capitec was going to offer the same loans to the same customers, but at a much lower interest rate, eventually running them out of business. Most people had no idea what was happening or who was behind this mass acquisition. Now, the infrastructure was quietly laid down, and then came the strike. In 2001, Capitec launched its first 2 branches in Bellville, Cape Town. Soon after came Durban, then Port Elizabeth, then Vereeniging and King Williamstown. These were the testing phases, the early days. Now, at first, the business world didn't take them seriously. The industry still viewed them as glorified loan sharks, not real bankers. But first thing they did was to slash the interest rates, first to 20%. But it didn't bring them any more customers. So they realized that the customers didn't understand interest rates. So they had to educate them. They slashed the interest rate again to 17%, then 15%. Then word quickly spread that Capitec was offering 30-day payday loans at half the cost of competitors. Even better, they offered a 3-month repayment option, which appealed to a lot of people. Once customers started experiencing the simplicity and affordability of Capitec's services, adoption grew rapidly. Then came the game changer. Capitec was very helpful to old and illiterate people who were never experienced in banking. They made it easy to understand and affordable compared to the intimidating big banks charging service fee just for breathing inside their branches. Now later, Capitec would give you a 10% interest annually for keeping your cash in the savings account. At this point, the big banks finally started to take notes. They responded by launching the Mzansi accounts aimed at low-income market. While it gained traction briefly, Capitec remained a superior option. Unlike traditional banks, Capitec's team knew how to price their products properly and meet customers where they were. Traditional banks, on the other hand, had made billions of unjustifiable service fees, such as fees for bounce transactions, which cost the bank nothing, but were still charged at a high rate. Now, Capitec avoided these exploitative practices. Their products were better, pricing smarter, and their focus on real customer needs set them apart. During this period, PSG was facing a crisis. Its share price was falling due to the association of PSG Investment Bank with microlenders, many of which were in the process of being slowly converted into Capitec branches. It took time for Capitec to shed the image of being a loan shark operation and establish itself as a legitimate bank. Still, the leadership of PSG believed that Capitec was ready to operate independently. It had the right people in place, a clear strategy, and growing traction in the right market. At the time, Capitec's biggest competitors in the lending space were African Bank and Sambo Bank, both of which were targeting the same underserved niche market. However, due to poor management, both rivals eventually collapsed, while Capitec continued to grow. Once PSG decided to spin off Capitec, the team had to stand on their own. They needed serious funding to fully legitimize their operation. From converting storefronts to formal branches to integrating their technology systems, but no one wanted to back them, even though the business itself was performing very well. With no other option to raising capital, now Capitec listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in 2002. They had hoped to launch the share price at 5 rands per share, but it opened at 3 rands and quickly dropped. At one point, falling to 1 rand and eventually to just 80 cents per share. Things were looking bleak. In fact, the total value of the company shares was at one point less than the value of its actual assets. Still, the founding team didn't give up. The top 4 executives invested millions of their own money to keep the company afloat while they worked on securing outside funding. Despite their solid operation on the ground, nobody believed it was possible to build a successful bank in South Africa outside of the Big Four. The idea of an independent bank hustling its way to the top seemed impossible at the time. Eventually, they secured a breakthrough: USAID, United States Agency for International Development. They agreed to back them with a 50 million rands check. Basically, these guys explained to the Americans that they were helping poor communities by giving them microloans at a very little interest rate. And then in turn, these people were uplifting themselves out of poverty through this money, creating businesses, whatever the case may be. And the Americans were convinced and they gave them the check. Capitec used that funding as surety to raise additional capital. When they returned to the market, investors took notice. The USAID backing gave Capitec credibility. Now everyone wanted in, fearing they might miss out on a potential success story in the making. One of the smartest things Capitec did was to never use customers' deposits for investments, a common trap that leads to collapse in the event of a panic. Instead, they focused purely on lending until they had the right systems in place. Only in 2003 did Capitec start accepting deposits. They built their foundation carefully, unlike pyramid schemes or unstable lenders that collapse the moment too much customers try to withdraw their funds. With funding in place, Capitec went all in on expansion, especially in rural areas and townships. The leadership team hit the ground themselves, scouting locations near taxi ranks, pep stores, ShopRite outlets, anywhere close to their target customers. The old micro-lending shops were being converted into full-service banks. Now in the mid-2000s, Capitec branches began popping up everywhere. They even struck a deal with supermarkets to allow their customers to withdraw cash at their tills, which helped solve the problem of limited ATMs available at that time. Now that strategy was such a success that soon other banks followed in that same strategy. By 2007, Capitec had reached 1 million customers. Then in 2009, they opened their first branch in a shopping mall, something that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier when mall owners still saw them as weird loan sharks. Amazingly, Capitec accomplished all of this without any major advertising. The bank grew entirely through word of mouth because the services were necessary, affordable, and reliable. Capitec wasn't just offering banking, it was offering hope and a sense of dignity to customers the traditional banks had ignored for decades. The bank now has close to 13 million customers. It has more customers than the big banks. Its relentless focus on cost efficiency has paid off handsomely. The bank has consistently delivered double-digit growth year after year for over 15 years, far outpacing its competitors. Today, Capitec stock is trading at 1.4 to 1.5 thousand rands, representing a staggering increase from its early days. It's widely regarded as a perfect case study on how to grow a successful bank from the ground up. Now, as Capitec evolves, it is gradually shifting from its unsecured lending roots towards a more traditional banking model, including expansion into small business lending. They want to capture a larger share of the formal banking sector, challenging established rivals in new segments. However, Capitec is no longer the scrappy underdog. It now faces growing competition from digital-first, tech-savvy banking startups, many of which have drawn aspiration from Capitec's own success and now aim to replace it or surpass it. This story goes beyond what's shown in the video. It's my own summary of the Capitec's journey. I've intentionally left out many of the finer details, especially those involving the numbers and various measures between the micro lenders, as including all of them would have made this video far more complex, way longer and harder to follow. You see, my goal was to highlight the most important points while keeping it clear, digestible and easy to understand. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.